Okay, today I want to talk about why you can have this really difficult psychological relationship with work. Why does work feel like it maybe triggers you when you think about it, when you show up to it, when you're not at it, and it just comes back and recurs to you? It seems to dominate your life, and you develop this like victim victor relationship with your boss or your coworkers or the obligations or the demands of your work, and you just build this resentment towards your job. Why does that happen? Even when your job is fine, even when you're maybe making good money or not making good money, but what is that? Why does that happen? And I want to explain why this is something your body does. This is something that your body treats work like it's a threat, even when your job is stable, even when your team is fine, even when nothing is technically wrong. Because what I want to do is I want to dig deep into these dependencies that we develop, and this dependent relationship that we have to work, not to work, but to our jobs, right? This dependency on the income it gives us, on the approval it gives us, on the status or the role that it gives us. This creates a state of chronic vigilance that no productivity system can fix because when you are subject to the at will employment structure of our version of capitalism, which I'm not saying it's bad, I'm not saying it's good, it's just a psychological feature of that system that you will need to figure out how to develop a secure relationship with that job and with the people in it. You need to learn to reverse any kind of maladaptive or resentment generating um, relationships that you have or ideas that you have about your job by building enough resources in your own personal life and enough control in your own personal life to reframe your job as something you choose, not as something you endure. So if you've ever felt drained before your day even begins, and listen, I've been there, and you've been reactive to very small requests, or tense during silence, then this will help you understand why. And we also want to kind of dig into what to do about that. So, when you can't opt out, this is our first point. When you can't opt out, every single input feels like a threat, right? So, what happens? You show up to work on Monday, you log in, you brace. You're like, all right, here we go. And maybe the meetings aren't even high stakes, which is then weird that it creates that reaction inside you, right? But your pulse still rises, your heart rate still rises, right? You hesitate before speaking, or you try to just say the right word. I didn't mean that, da, 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 right? Like you talk at work. I'm not talking about corporate speak, but you become deferential at work in ways that you would never be in any other relationship, right? You reread every message for tone. You finish the day exhausted, not from the workload. You can work. You've put yourself out there and you've worked hard before. You don't come home exhausted every day from workload. You come home exhausted from monitoring. I remember I had a job. I mean, I've had many jobs, but I remember I had a job in high school where we were installing um, railroad ties in industrial landscaping, and we were just carrying these railroad ties day after day, 12 hours a day. Just, I don't even think this was like labor compliant. We were just working on a farm, like just doing this insane lifting all day long, and it felt so good. And I came home from that day feeling so good because I was doing it with my friends. We were making something cool. We were doing something physical. We were all getting paid pretty much the same amount of money. Built this great sense of camaraderie. And now today I work in tech, and oh my gosh, the emotional exhaustion I bring home is 100 times what I did in that job, right? And it's not from the cognitive labor, from the relational labor, but not the relational labor with the people. It's not about the relational labor with the people at the job. It's about the relational labor of myself in relation to my job. It's not about my relationship with my boss. It's about my relationship with my job, right? So that's what we're going to address. Because what you're actually experiencing and what I experience when we have those feelings of exhaustion, we call it burnout, but it is not burnout. It's the physical reaction of a nervous system trained to associate visibility with risk. What do I mean by that? Your body is doing the math even if you're not. You cannot afford to lose this job. You do not control the timing or the scope of the tasks. You may or may not be able to complete these things, which may put the job at risk, which may put your apartment at risk, which may put this at risk, right? Like, you don't define what good enough looks like. You don't get to leave without disruption, right? You can build this whole story where, like, you're a slave and there's this axe that's about to chop you and everything in your life's gonna fall apart. Like there's a world where this is kind of true. There's a version of your relationship with your job where that is kind of true. And you feel threat because your autonomy has been outsourced, but the expectations upon you have not. This is a very difficult position to be in. This is where most people live in modern employment scenarios, to be honest with you. So now I want to draw from a concept and I want to apply it to this situation. This is from a scholar named Julian Rotter. This is about locus of control. So I want to talk about locus of control and the illusion of agency. So Julian Rotter, a long time ago, like 60 years ago, wrote a paper called Generalized Expectancies for Internal versus External Control of Reinforcement. And she's a psychologist, and Julian Rotter introduced this concept of locus of control. The concept of locus of control is a framework. And this framework helps us to understand how people interpret the link between action and outcome. So in order to understand what locus of control means, you have to kind of understand how it splits into two concepts. First, you have the internal locus of control. An internal locus of control means you believe your actions meaningfully shape what happens next. An external locus of control means you believe outcomes are driven by systems and chance or other people's decisions. And Rotter found that persistent exposure to external control leads to passivity, chronic tension, and motivational collapse. Not because people are unambitious, but because the structure has trained them to believe that effort and results are decoupled from one another. And this is exactly what most modern jobs produce. You work very hard, but raises and layoffs and promotions and recognition all feels very arbitrary, like at the whims of the executive team, and your contribution and the quality and the quantity of your contribution feels to have very little effect on that directly. And you manage tone and availability more than you actually manage or focus on the content of your work. You show up for meetings that have no criteria for success. And over time, you stop thinking of work as something you do, and you start experiencing your job as something that you survive. What makes this chronic is something very significant. And it's that you can't speak up without risk. And this is something that people really need to understand in the modern job economy. People say, "Oh, I'm going to log in a complaint with HR, or I'm going to effect change in my company." Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. Somebody hasn't told you this. I think most people know this. But if somebody hasn't told you this, dude, your job is not a place to be honest. Are you kidding me? Your job is not a place. Your job is a place to perform. It is a place to perform. And the way to gamify that is to find a way to enjoy that performance, right? Is to find a way to make that performance an act of play for yourself. Because in your job, you cannot speak up without risk. And if the risk of speaking up puts other things in your life at risk, like puts your mortgage at risk, well, then you can't speak up. And now it feels less like a performance and it feels more like a gag, right? You can't just exit your job without consequences. You can't disconnect without being perceived as disengaged. So you're just showing up doing like chronic reputation management, right? You stay visible and you stay agreeable and deferential and responsive and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's not you. That's not actually anybody. You aren't being evaluated once on some task or some job. You're being evaluated constantly. Are you a culture fit? And the evaluation isn't an output. It's on your posture. It's on your mood. It's on your tone. And the result is a default stress state, which is this very low threat, high monitoring, continuous elevation of your heart rate. So Rotter, with her development of this concept of locus of control, wasn't writing about corporate life, but the dynamic still holds. When you're held responsible for outcomes that you can't shape, and when your exit options are limited, your nervous system won't feel safe. It will stay ready, and that readiness feels like anxiety. But it's not irrational. It's a function of being too exposed with too little control. So, I want to focus on one way that we try to address this that actually doesn't work, and that's reframing. Why does reframing not work? Well, reframing doesn't work. Cognitive reframes, they fail here because the body is tracking structure, not story, right? You can try to deal with this and go to therapy, and you can journal, and you can meditate. You can try to be more grateful in your life and hope that that has some effect on your poor relationship with your job. But your system knows the truth. If you misstep at your job, you pay. You pay. If you disengage, the consequences are external and you cannot absorb them. That's not just, this is not a mindset issue. That's what you need to realize. This is not a reframing issue, it's a leverage issue. Until that changes, your body will not downregulate because it's actually responding to a real circumstance. It's actually like people say, oh, we have this sympathetic nervous system. We have this limbic response to trauma where where biologically we are wired to run away from tigers, but there's no tigers anymore. So we have a trauma response at work. Oh, there's a tiger. There's a real tiger. It's called homelessness. The modern day tiger is homelessness, and the trauma response is appropriate. And a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. And so what you have to do is get leverage, right? In the evolutionary, you have to get the ancient version, you have to get the modern version of the ancient spear. So previously, if it was a tiger versus just an unarmed human, your chances are pretty low. If it's a tiger versus a human with a spear that's trained with that spear, or a fighting weapon or a hunting weapon, they do stand a better chance. Maybe not the best chance, but still a better chance. Do you want, what you want is leverage. If you've got a group of hunters around you and you all have spears and a tiger approaches you, your chances get even better. That's the modern version of that's called networking. So, how do we reverse this pattern, this emotional relationship to our job in a specific way, in this maladaptive way? Well, it's not maladaptive, it's just undesirable. So, there's two structural corrections that actually can shift this pattern. Number one, and this is tough because here we get into like Dave Ramsey territory. But number one is like accumulate resources until leaving is viable. You accumulate and you save and you budget and you save. Like you if you don't have that FU money, you have to get that FU money. That is the number one priority. The number one thing you have to accumulate. If you don't know how to save or if you struggle to save, this is the number one top of the list core survival skill. And that's, I know, super tough to hear. I remember there was a time in my life when I had to start over financially. And the truth was, at the time, I didn't have any financial literacy. And I had to go through all that myself. And I teach all that to myself. And I realized my experience of powerlessness and that kind of relationship to my job was a result of my personal financial situation, less than it was indicative about the quality of my employment situation. Second, redesign what the job is for on your terms once you accumulate those resources. So once you have those, 6 months, 3 months, even 3 months of expenses or a viable skill path, even a confident fallback network, then the job becomes optional. Even if you need the relief of this right now, just try to outline a confident fallback network where you could replace enough of your income to be fine if things don't work out. That gives you enough leverage you have to have something that allows you to say F you. You have to have something. Even if it's just a fallback network where you know you could replace enough of your income to survive in your current situation. That's enough to show up and be like, you know what? If worse comes to worse, I'll be fine. That gives you that little bit of space to be free, to be you. So you start to approach work as a platform to extract value from, not just a stage to perform on. You interpret problems as things to solve, not tests to pass. And you regain internal control. And all the work you do, you think of it less as, oh my God, I can't believe I'm working to build somebody else's dream. No. I'm working to build my portfolio and my skills. This adds value to me. When I add value to my company, that adds value to me. Not by changing your environment at the job. It's not about the job. It's about changing what the job is allowed to mean for you by gaining leverage. So to wrap all this up, most people do not actually hate their jobs. Most people who think they hate their jobs don't actually hate their jobs. What most people who hate their jobs actually hate is needing jobs. People don't hate their jobs. They hate needing their jobs. They don't resent the work. They resent the power dynamic due to their personal situation. And until you fix that structurally, not emotionally, your body will keep flinching even on good days because it's sending you an accurate signal. You'll keep second guessing your tone and your posture and your presence because you should. And you'll keep experiencing that mild panic before calendar blocks that never hurt you. But they never gave you safety either because you never extracted safety from them. Because you never translated your time into security through saving. So I hate for the takeaway from all this to be save money. It sounds really bright and all of that. And I guess you could say, hey man, people with money have maladaptive relationships with their jobs too. It's like, all right, whatever. I guess maybe they should find a different video then. But for most people, this issue is an issue of acquiring the space to exercise emotional leverage in their relationship with their job and recognizing that what they think is burnout and what they think is a toxic workplace and what they think is a bad job all actually is a poor relationship with their job due to the fact that they have not created personal leverage for themselves outside of that job. So you want to, again, fix your finances, heighten your skills, reclaim optionality. A lot of this can be done in like 3 to 6 months. And again, clarify what you're using work to fund. Because you can't feel free in systems where your input doesn't shape the outcome of your life. And your system knows that, whether you admit it or not.